Ukrainian President Zelensky initially approved the plan. They lied to us. They blamed Russia for this. Some German political leaders may have been willing to overlook evidence pointing to Ukraine for fear of undermining domestic support for the war effort. But German police are politically independent, and they're like, you blew up our oil. According to several people familiar with the Dutch report, U.S. officials then promptly informed Germany, according to U.S. and German officials. Okay, so they all lied. A drunken evening, a rented yacht. They're going to dumb this down like it's a drunken evening when it's an act of international sabotage that's going to theoretically lead towards an escalation of a world global war with the nuclear power. They call it a drunken evening, right? It was the kind of outlandish scheme that might bubble up in a bar around closing time, okay? Or it was a terroristic conspiracy. In May of 2022, a handful of senior Ukrainian military officers and businessmen gathered around to talk about how they stopped the Russian invasion. Alcohol, patriotic fervor. Someone suggested, let's take out Nord Stream. But after all, the twin natural gas pipelines that carried Russian gas to Europe were providing billions to the Kremlin war machine. And so just over 4 months later, Scandinavian seismologists picked up signals there was an explosion. They were caused by 3 powerful explosions, the largest ever recorded release of natural gas. Someone alert that Greta, which is equivalent to the annual CO2 emissions of Denmark. Okay, a whole country worth of CO2 emissions just bubbling out into the middle of the ocean. One of the most audacious acts of sabotage in modern history, the operation worsened an energy crisis in an entire continent of Europe, an assault on critical infrastructure that could be considered an act of war under international law. Theories swirled about who was responsible. We were here saying, oh, definitely it was not Russia. We thought it was Ukraine plus the CIA. We're like, yeah, I mean, it's clearly like Jake Sullivan, I think, is who we said was responsible for it. Jake Sullivan was the one who's probably like, I don't know who did it. Could Putin have done it? Obviously not. Now, for the first time, the outlines of the real story can be told. Why? Because they're over Ukraine. They're like, okay, you guys are done now. We're going to focus more on Gaza. The Ukrainian operation cost 300 grand. That's it. According to people who participated in it, it involved a small rented yacht, 6-member crew, trained civilian divers. One was a woman whose presence helped create the illusion they were a group of friends. I always laugh when I read media speculation about some huge operation involving secret services, submarines, or drones or whatever. Whole thing was born out of a night of heavy boozing and the determination of people who wanted to risk their lives for their country and instigate World War III. Ukrainian President Zelensky initially approved the plan. They lied to us. They blamed Russia for this, according to one officer who participated and 3 people familiar with it. But later, when the CIA learned of it and they asked Zelensky to back off on it, he ordered a halt. Zelensky's commander-in-chief, Valery whatever, who was leading the effort, nonetheless forged ahead. Okay, so his commander-in-chief. So it was an official Ukrainian op. Zelensky knew about it, called it off. Apparently, there is no chain of command there, right? Or let's just say this. Zelensky just wanted plausible deniability here, right? Zelensky knew it was happening, was fine with it happening, otherwise it wouldn't have happened. So his commander-in-chief, who was leading the effort, went ahead. And don't act like it's like a bunch of drunken people, rogue agents. Zelensky knew, then said, no, you probably shouldn't do it. He's like, they're having that conversation. He's like, so you don't want me to do this, right? He's like, yeah, I definitely do not want you to blow up the pipeline. Okay, so I'm definitely not blowing it up, right? Don't blow up the pipeline. Gotcha. So, that's one of those conversations. And now he's like, no, I have no idea. It was a Ukrainian infrastructure attack. It's insane. And we paid for it. The Journal spoke to 4 senior Ukrainian defense and security officials who either participated in or had direct knowledge of it. All of them said the pipelines were a legitimate target of Ukraine's war. Portions of their account were corroborated by a nearly 2-year German police investigation. Okay, the Germans got totally screwed, which has obtained evidence including email, mobile, satellite phone communications, as well as fingerprints and DNA samples from the Sabotage team. The German inquiry hasn't directly linked Zelensky to the operation, though. Got it. Now, this guy, Ukraine's ambassador to the UK, the guy who apparently led it, said in a text exchange that he knows nothing of any such operations. No. Anything to the contrary, any suggestion to the contrary is a mere provocation. Don't you question me. Ukraine's armed services, he added, weren't authorized to conduct overseas missions. A senior official of the main Ukrainian intelligence service, SBU, denied the government had anything to do with it and said Zelensky did not approve the implementation of anything. Putin has blamed the U.S. for the attacks, clearly. A senior Russian diplomat in Berlin echoed the claim, said the German investigations were fairy tales worthy of Brothers Grimm. In June, Germany's federal prosecutor, quietly issued the first arrest warrant for a Ukrainian professional diving instructor for his involvement. The German investigation is now focusing on that other guy, Zelensky, and his aides, people familiar with the probe say. Finding could upend relations between Kyiv and Berlin, which has provided much of the financing and military equipment to Ukraine, so the U.S. is number one. Some German political leaders may have been willing to overlook evidence pointing to Ukraine for fear of undermining domestic support for the war effort. But German police are politically independent, and they're like, you blew up our oil. Listen to this quote. An attack of this scale is a sufficient reason to trigger the collective defense clause of NATO. But our critical infrastructure was blown up by a country that we support with massive weapons shipments and billions in cash, said a senior German official familiar with the probe. And it's absolutely right. It was a false flag attack. It was an internal attack from Ukraine on German infrastructure, on EU infrastructure. Following the May 2022 pact between the businessmen and the military, it was agreed that the former would finance and help execute the project. But the army had no funds and was increasingly relying on foreign financing. And so they can't say, well, where'd that money go? Privately funded. And 300 grand is like nothing in this whole thing. It's like, should be like, it's like nothing. We've given him $100 billion. Sitting general with experience in special operations would oversee the mission. Okay, so a sitting Ukrainian general endorsed by the Ukrainian state, which one participant described as a public-private partnership. He would report directly to the head of Ukraine's armed forces. Within days, Zelensky approved the plan. According to 4 people familiar with the plot, all arrangements were made verbally, no paper trail, because it's a conspiracy to get this thing escalating into a deeper war. But the next month, the Dutch military intelligence agency learned of the plot. The Dutch learned about it, and they warned the CIA. According to several people familiar with the Dutch report, U.S. officials then promptly informed Germany, according to U.S. and German officials. Okay, so they all lied. The CIA warned Zelensky's office, you better stop this, bucko. The Ukrainian president then ordered him to stop. Now, according to Ukrainian officers and officials familiar with the conversation, as well as Western intelligence officials, but the general ignored the order, right? Because as we did the role play. Okay, you want me to stop? Yeah, definitely, yeah. But his team modified the original plan. The general tasked with commanding the operation enlisted some top special operations officers. One of them was this guy, a decorated colonel. This guy's currently on trial in Ukraine for unrelated charges. He was released on bail over a year after detention, saying he wasn't authorized to speak about it. But in a subsequent interview, he said the sabotage had 2 positive effects. It helped loosen Russia's grip on European countries supporting Kyiv. And, you know, by the way, like, there's some real economic components to this. So if you notice, the United States is now becoming a net exporter of oil and gas, right? Which is not bad for our country, but essentially we're shipping it over there, right? So it's not coming from Russia anymore. So the CIA and U.S. economic interests are strongly aligned with blowing up that pipeline so that the Europeans can't get oil from Russia. They get it from us. And left Moscow with only one main avenue, pipelines traversing Ukraine. Despite the war, Ukraine collects lucrative transit fees for Russian oil. So the sabotage team, right, internally studied an older elaborate plan. The businessman, I'm sure, is going to make money from this. Elaborate plan to blow up the pipeline. In other words, don't believe these guys are blowing this up solely because they're like, we have to stop Russia and preserve democracy, right? Like, there's other interest at stake here. Somebody else is going to be making millions of dollars if the Russian gas is not coming from Russia. After dismissing the idea, there was going to be another elaborate plan. Western experts after Russia invaded, but in September, plotters rented a 50-foot leisure yacht in Germany's Baltic port town. So they went to Germany, got a German yacht, and blew up German pipelines. The boat was leased with the help of a Polish travel agency that was set up by Ukrainian intelligence as a cover. It was a Ukrainian op, man. One crew member, a military officer, was a seasoned skipper. 4 were experienced divers. Looks like that's the boat. Leave Germany's port, spend 20 minutes at that depth, 3 hours of decompression. So they were there. They knew exactly what they were doing. In the wake of the attack, which took 3 of the 4 conduits forming the pipeline, energy prices surged, right? It's like chaos in Europe. Germany and other nations scrambled to nationalize energy companies that handled Russian gas, but they collapsed after the pipelines were destroyed. Even today, Germany is still paying around $1 million a day alone to lease floating terminals for liquefied gas, which has only partly replaced the Russian gas flows. I wonder, like, who owns those, right? Germany, Denmark, Sweden, the US, and others sent out warships and divers, underwater drones to investigate. What happened? How did this happen? Okay, idiots. Germany, Denmark, Sweden, and the US. We're going to investigate this, get to the bottom of it. They all knew. Zelensky blew it up. Zelensky took Zalazny to task, whatever, but the general shrugged it off, right? He's like, you're in big trouble for blowing up that pipeline. He's like, I know. I'm so punished. What, am I grounded? Okay, I'll be grounded. And then they just, high-fived each other. He told Zelensky that the sabotage team, once dispatched, went incommunicado, and I couldn't call it off. It's like a torpedo. Once you fire it, you can't pull it back. Nothing we could do. Sorry. Day after the attack, Germany's Foreign Secret Service sent a second tip-off about the plot, which again passed from the CIA. So the CIA knew about it, but we had John Kirby and Jake Sullivan all come out and play dumb for months. The Netherlands built deep intelligence gathering capacity in Ukraine and Russia, and so they knew. German investigators questioned a bunch of people, analyzed the mobile data traffic, Polish security. It's just insane. Now, so there's a warrant out, and they did it. We knew from day One, it made the most logical sense. Now it's absolutely been confirmed. And that's what's happening there. So meanwhile, at the White House, with it's on the brink of World War III, we have this happening. This is clipped over from End Wokeness. So, there's a little dancing going on over there at the White House. Wonder if she's going to answer any questions about this today when she comes out to address the American people, if that actually happens or not.